Hello, hello. Welcome to a wonderful episode of I Like Art podcast. My name is Sara Glupker, and I am thrilled, beyond thrilled, to be introducing you to one of my favorite people in the art world today. And I just cannot wait to dive into our conversation. It's going to be so much fun. Before I let you know who it is, she has a BFA in visual arts and a post-grad in graphic design. She's the writer curator behind the contemporary art site that you probably know about called the Jealous Curator, and has curated art shows from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, San Francisco to Toronto. She creates her own artwork as well mixed media collages, which combine found images, paint, and as much humor as she can pack into each title. She also creates sculptures and other things too. When she's not in the studio, you can find her writing books such as Creative Black, Collage, and Your Inner Critic is a Big Jerk. Those were the first three. And also a big important art book, Now with Women, and How to Spot an Artist, as her fourth and fifth books. She has had great pleasure speaking recently on the TEDx stage. She's also spoke at events such as with PIXAR, Creative Mornings, CreativeLive, and was interviewed for several video segments on Oprah.com. So without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce to you one of my favorite artists and all the things. Her name is Danielle Krysa. Welcome to I Like Art podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be on the other side of the mic.
Yes. I know that my listeners, I have a really interesting audience because I have a combination of artists and I also have people who are interested in art who are not necessarily artists, but like the topic of art and are interested in living more creatively. So I think it's just really interesting to share your perspective because you're an artist, you went to art school, you also have your newsletter that it's not even, I didn't even mention it in the introduction. We're going to definitely talk about that. You have a podcast and you're doing so many things that highlight contemporary artists. And it's so great to have somebody recognize contemporary artists, talk about them, share their work, and let all the rest of us know more about these artists too. So, oh my goodness, there's so much to talk about, Danielle. You're located in Canada. And what
Yep.
part of Canada are you?
I'm in British Columbia, so I'm about 4 hours inland from Vancouver, sort of right
Okay.
above Spokane, Washington.
Okay. So I definitely was doodling a lot during my geography classes, and I realized I have no clue because I'm from Michigan. So I just assume that we're next door neighbors, but
Right.
we're really not.
I know. I'm a couple thousand to the left.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I know you and Andy J Pizza are friends, and I've heard you interviewed on his podcast, and he talks about how you guys are friendly, neighbors because he's from the Midwest. I feel the same way.
Right.
The Midwest and the Canadians, I feel like we're all friends. It's cool.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, Danielle, for those people who need to know a little bit more about you or have heard your story or who haven't, tell us about you. Tell us about what you were like as a kid. Did you make art as a child? And what age did you know you were an artist?
Well, I can't remember a time when I wasn't making stuff. My mom is an artist, and so she always had like a little studio room in our house, and she always had great supplies. And she said from the time I could walk, I would steal stuff off of her table. Little hand would just come up, and God love her, she actually let me play with like oil pastels when I was 2. Like, who does that? But anyway, um, so I can't remember not making stuff, and I would go through her sewing drawer and find ribbons and buttons, and I wanted her
Mm,
to teach me how to sew. I used to make my own little stuffed animals, and
mhm.
we were making forts outside out of leaves and whatever. So I was just always making. So I don't think I ever had that moment where I thought I'm an artist. It just was.
Mhm.
There was one amazing moment though. My dad was a scientist, PhD scientist, and he framed all my mom's work. And when I was about 3, I was drawing with the oil pastels and a gigantic bird sitting in a tiny little tree.
Yes.
My dad came and looked over my shoulder and said, well, we need to frame that. And he
Ooh.
framed it with glass in a gold frame. It's still in my studio right now. And I just remember feeling like I've made it. Like
Yes.
my art is being framed in a gold frame by my dad. Like this is big. And that was sort of like a crystallizing moment. I remember being an artist.
Oh, I love that. Oh, so your mom was an artist. I did know that. What type of art did your mom make? Does she make?
Watercolor.
Okay.
Yeah, and she makes watercolor look effortless,
Mm,
which it is not.
mhm,
Um, yeah, and she was very successful. Like when my dad was doing his PhD, I was born while he was doing his PhD. I'm the oldest, and so he had like a small fellowship with school, but their bread and butter was basically paid for by my mom selling her art.
wow.
Yeah, she did really, really well, and so, I kind of just always grew up like seeing her making stuff. I mean, she was often set up on the dining room table. Like she didn't have a studio in most of our little houses until I got a bit older.
Mhm,
But I don't know, I just grew up seeing that, and
mhm.
I just thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
And then my dad being so different,
Mhm.
he really encouraged her. And so he thought it was great that I was, going down the same path.
That's so cool. My parents are not artists at all, so I'm fascinated by the idea of having a mom as an artist. It's like,
Well,
woo.
it was funny because by the time when I went to art school, it was my dad that was encouraging me. My mom was
Yeah.
nervous. She
Uh-huh.
said she wasn't. I mean, she was supportive, but I could
Mhm.
I could hear the quake in her voice. Like I knew because she knows it's hard, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I could feel a little more hesitancy from her than him.
Mhm.
But it sure was awesome having supplies constantly around.
Yes. Now, as a parent, you have a son. Is
Yes.
he into art? Was he like that?
Not Not at all.
Okay.
I tried when he was little. Um, he's 16 now.
Mhm.
He's a very good writer. He's always been a really good writer. And
Oh,
so when he was little, that's what he would say. He would say, I don't really like drawing the pictures. I like writing the stories.
okay.
And I said, well, that's creativity too. Like you do it
Mhm.
any way you want to do it. And so he's actually, he's in 11th grade now. So it's time to start thinking about university. And he's actually thinking about journalism and creative writing. So
Wow.
we'll see.
Very much like
Yes.
his mom, because you're a very
Yeah.
good writer. Yes.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes. Oh, it's so fun to hear because as the generations move forward, it's interesting to see who ends up gravitating or being more like you or your husband or your partner. I have
Mhm.
3 daughters, and I always wanted to have a little tribe of artists. And it's like, be careful what you wish for because it's bananas at my house. But yeah, they're always making stuff creative, stealing my things. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want it any other way, but
I really wanted Charlie to be like that. Like when he was little, he would. Like I have a picture of him when he was 2 where we were painting. He was just in a diaper and we were painting. And then he said, I paint me, mommy. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I paint me. And he wanted to paint his whole body.
mhm.
So I was like, all right, knock yourself out. So he painted his whole body and he just loved it. I had to take a whole bunch of pictures of him. And then I just picked him up carefully and took
Yeah.
him into the shower. And then the next morning he said, I paint me again, mommy. So he did it again. And
Oh, good for you.
so he did lots of stuff when he was little. And then sadly, I think what it was like in kindergarten, I think his inner critic kind of crept in.
Mm,
Like, I think he was looking around at other kids, and I think he felt like he wasn't as good as some of the other kids in his class, so he decided he wasn't good at drawing.
mm,
And I was in the middle of writing all those books, right? So I was like I kept trying to, like but, I mean, I also didn't wanna jam it down his throat if that wasn't his
yeah,
thing. I
yeah,
just wanted to make sure he wasn't quitting because
mhm,
he felt
yeah,
like he couldn't. But then he
mhm,
just said, "I really like writing stories." And that didn't slow down. So I was like, "Okay, as long as,
mhm,
you feel like you can express yourself in the way you want to, all good."
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good for you. I think that's so good to encourage our kids and foster whatever that creativity looks like.
Mhm.
So, and I
Well,
love
he
that
had
you allowed
one
him.
such cool moment when he was 9. I'd been invited to speak at PIXAR, and, they knew I had a little kid, and The Good Dinosaur, was
Oh,
just about to come out. So they said, "Well, would you like to come down, to San Francisco and come to a VIP screening, like a friends and family screening of The Good Dinosaur?" And Charlie was just like, "Oh, what?" Like, Pixar movies were his are well, still
yeah.
are his some of his favorites. So, our whole family went down and, we got to go to the screening, and then, my friend that works there was like, "Well," it was a Saturday, so he's like, "Oh, I'll give you guys a tour." There was no one there, so we were there for 5 hours, just, like, in and
Wow.
out and looking at all the stuff, and, my friend said to him, "So Charlie, like" because this friend of mine is an artist, and so he said, "Oh, Charlie, do you like drawing and stuff?" And he said, "No," he said, I like writing, I like more like writing the stories." And Vincent said, "Well, let me show you the story writing department then." And Charlie's
Oh,
eyes just were like, "What?" So we went to the story writing department and he showed him how like the artists and the writers work together to develop the characters and then how the story turns into this and that. And we left there and we're heading back to the parking lot. And Charlie said, "Mommy, that was the best day of my life." And it was
oh,
so cool because it showed him that there was room for what he wanted to do, and it
mhm.
also demystified, like, normal people
Yes.
at Pixar, and it's like, if you want to do something like that, you can, like, aim your goals that way and go do
Mhm,
it, like, it kinda demystified the whole thing,
mhm,
and it was so and I really think that's what planted his seed to
mm.
know that he could be a writer, and that doesn't just mean writing books, it could mean, writing plots for video games, it could mean, like,
Yeah.
writing movies, it could mean anything, so it really was like a that was a very proud parent moment, I was so
Mhm.
happy that because of my career, he was able
Yes.
to have that experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much, and I think it's really cool to talk about the the benefits of having an artist as one of your parents because you're right, it's not an easy journey, but cool opportunities can arise where they see the world through your eyes or they get to go do those types of experiences and shows them that my mom, for instance, my mom, she's an artist, but there's this writing part that I can see, yeah, like you got to go see the drawing room, then to go to the writing room. That's so
It
amazing.
was
We
really
had a
cool.
similar kind of experience this summer with my girls. We went to Universal Studios, went to Harry Potter Land, and
Yeah.
my girls read all the books. So to see this, to be in this world and to be an artist and pull them aside and say, do you understand that this is somebody's imagination? Let's talk about J.K. Rowling and where she started. That she was a mom, she lived in a trailer, she had this idea, and now we are drinking the butter beer and tasting the food that's in the book. Like that's just such a cool, mind-blowing experience for an adult, let alone. And then we went through the Seuss village. They had a Dr. Seuss world, and to go on the ride and you feel like you're in the book and to say,
Wow.
yeah, this is a person that had all of these ideas in their mind, and now we're here to experience it in real time. It's so cool. So
That's
I
amazing.
think you
Yeah.
should definitely be proud of, the extra expense and time and effort it takes to bring your family along to go to something where you could have cut costs and did the talk on your own and
Yeah.
not brought them. So,
Yeah, and I usually do. I
yeah, right.
usually do cut the cost, but when there's experiences like that, it's like, "Okay, everybody, let's go,"
Yes.
because it's so worth it?
Yeah.
And
Ooh,
just to see
I
the light bulb go off in a
yeah.
nine-year-old at the time, it was really cool.
And we'll just have to see what happens. I can't wait to find
I
out
know.
what happens
I
next with your
know, me
son.
too.
Oh, that was such a fun tangent. Okay, not a tangent. It's all related, right? Tell us about, okay, after that, you decided to go to art school. And I've had similar experiences going to art school also. I have my BFA. And I heard you talk about your experiences in art school in various places and how you went to art school to be an artist and then you went down a different career path. I don't know how deep you want to go into that or um
Mm.
that
Well,
definitely
yeah,
led
so
you on this writing path.
Yeah, well, that was an accident, but everything's a tangent and an accident,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, well, I actually went to university for marine biology,
Okay.
because I was completely the art kid, like growing up and all through high school and everything. And but I was also really good at sciences, and it seemed crazy to me to go to school for art. Like it seemed so irresponsible. And so I was like, I'll go for science because that's a
Mm-hmm.
job. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. And so I went for marine biology, and I did first year and I did fine. And then my dad, right at the end of my first year, my dad called and said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You should be in fine art." A
Wow.
scientist father said you should switch to art. What? And this is the phone call where I could hear the hesitancy in my mom.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad just said, it's who you are. Like, it's who you've been since you were born.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, but dad, what about like money? Like, how am I going to pay my rent? And he said,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter. He said, do what you love and the money will come. And if it doesn't, you won't care because you'll be happy.
Oh,
And
so good.
so I switched my major. I switched to fine art. So I showed up at the following September, so excited to be an art student. And then it was all downhill from there because I did not fit in at all. This was like early 90s, super contemporary,
Mm-hmm.
conceptual school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 19. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'd grown up in a really nice, like white middle class, happy family in a town called Summerland. Like I had no angst. I had like, you know,
Yes.
nothing to say. And at the time it was like abstract work was king and I didn't do abstract work.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I always joke that I showed up in my like matching Esprit sweater set and
Me
everybody else
too.
in like
Yes.
dark makeup and big boots. And I was just like, what? Anyway, um, I still felt, I thought I was good. Like I, you know, I was still pretty
Mm-hmm.
confident. And then, but it was almost like an abusive relationship, you know, it just kind of chipped away at me and chipped away at me until finally, right before I graduated, my self-esteem was just so low.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a critique where I showed my final work for the final show. And I'd been just doing it in my res room. I didn't even use my studio at school because I just hated being there. So I brought all this work in, and my professor, who usually hated all my work, loved this work.
Mm.
And he
Yay.
went on and on. He said, I'd found a new niche. He'd never seen anything like this. Love, love, love. Um, so of course, everybody went along with him because nobody would ever disagree with the
Yeah.
professor. So everybody else loved it too.
Best day
So
ever.
what?
Best day ever. When you,
Yeah, I was like, thank God, 6 weeks
yay.
before graduation, it's like
Mm.
finally, as a painting major, the painting prof is saying that I'm good. And so he said the following week there'd be a visiting artist from New York, which was a big deal because this was on the west coast of Canada, and we'd actually studied this guy in art history, and he was now
Ooh.
coming to our class. And he said there was time for 3 people to show their work, and everybody was sort of too shy and mortified by the thought of it. But I just had this amazing crit and been told I'd found a new niche. So I volunteered. And so a week later, I showed up with the exact same pieces, put them up, and I got absolutely torn apart by everyone, led by the
Mm.
professor who had said that he'd loved it a week before. So I was so kind of blindsided. I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Like
Wait a minute.
shocked
Right.
that I felt like I was gonna cry. Like I didn't want to
Yeah.
cry.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't even defend myself. And the visiting artist just kind of watched the whole thing unfold. And he didn't say a word, but he just watched me react.
Mm.
Oh my God, it was horrible. And then the next girl went, and everyone just loved her stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Of course, right? And
Stop
these were
it.
supposed to be 10-minute crits. So hers was 10 minutes. Mine was 30 minutes. And at the very end of my 30 minutes, my professor said, in front of all these people I'd gone to art school with, we're all about to graduate together. He was the head of the painting department. And he said, quote, "You should never paint again."
Oh my goodness.
And
I've heard this
sadly, I
story
listened.
before, but it just floors me.
Yeah. And if it had been a one-off comment, I probably could have like brushed it off. But like I said, it was just sort of like years of being chipped
Yeah.
away at. And that was just like the straw that, broke the
Mm-hmm.
camel's back. And I was just like, okay, I quit, so I graduated, but then moved home to my parents' basement and cried a lot. And
Mm.
my dad, God love him, said, you know what, don't get a summer job. I'm going to buy you canvas and paint and like just
Yeah.
paint every day, like get your mojo back. And I tried really hard for about 6 months, maybe a year. And I mean, every time I brushed at the canvas, all I could hear was, you should never paint again. I just second guessed everything. And so I quit. And that was when I ended up making like the sort of, I mean, not a huge left turn, but I decided to go to design school.
Mm-hmm.
Because my work had always been very designy, and in art school it was super criticized for
Mm.
being designy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that wasn't abstract,
Yeah.
right? I
Yes.
love negative space.
Conceptual.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
text. I loved like
Yeah.
pop images, and none of that was flying at the time. So I applied to design school, and I got into all of the schools I applied to. And this was in 95 that I applied. So I started in 96, and I'd gotten into a print program at Emily Carr in Vancouver. And I'd also gotten into a new media program
Mm.
at Sheridan College in Ontario. And I thought, well, new media, nobody even really knew what that meant. CD-ROMs, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, maybe that's the future. I'll do that. So I did that. It was a 1-year intensive design program that you needed an undergrad for. So it was good. I had my BFA. So we started that program doing CD-ROMs. And at Christmas, we all went home, we came back. And in January, they said, okay, forget CD-ROMs. There's this thing called the internet. We're going to teach you guys how to build websites.
Mm.
Because this was like 96, 97. So
Yeah.
all of it was happening. So they taught us how to build websites, and there was 25 of us in the program, and they basically like trucks backed up, and we were all hired by a different company, like, because nobody knew how to make them.
Yeah.
So I
Wow.
was hired by IBM, like straight out of school. And so I just ended up going down this like design path. I ended up
Mm-hmm.
getting hired by an ad agency. I spent my whole like 15 to 18 years working in advertising and design. I worked on Nike and BMW
Wow.
and Nintendo, all these big clients. And it was a great place to hide out from making art, because I could say to myself, well, I'm being creative every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I did start making art again, but nobody knew. Like I would make tiny little things
Mm-hmm.
at night, and then I would throw them away the next day. So my boyfriend, now husband, he didn't even really know I was making stuff.
Oh my
I
goodness.
Yeah, I was just so I truly, truly believed that I couldn't be an artist. And by this point, I'd kind of forgotten that prophet even said that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the you should never paint again wasn't even connected to him anymore. It was just a truth that I believed, like the sky is blue.
Mm-hmm.
I just believed that I couldn't be an artist. And so I wasn't. And then it wasn't really until my son was born, and I quit being a creative director to stay home with him. And that was sort of when I was like, well, I was really missing it. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe now is the time. And like watching him just be so naturally creative, like
Mm-hmm.
kids are just born without that
The
worry and the filter and whatever. He's just painting himself, and he was, like he would be a dinosaur for the whole day. And I was just like, I miss just being playful and making and putting
Mm-hmm.
glitter on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of the beginning of the journey back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you became the Jealous Curator, right?
Yeah.
That's when that
Yes.
all started.
Yeah, he
Your
was two
blog.
and a half when I started it. And again, that was my husband kind of I mean, he could see how sad I was. And I kept Googling, like finding all these artists I love. And like, this is pre-Pinterest and Instagram, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was online Googling people, and it was so inspiring for like a couple seconds, and then it was so overwhelmingly crushing because it just felt like everything had already been done, and
Mhm.
people were so much more talented than me, so why should I even bother? And so Greg, my husband, very sort of sweetly and gently said, this jealousy is eating you alive. And he said, I got to quote him properly. He said, when you keep jealousy inside, it becomes toxic. But if you can say it out loud in a positive way, you can transform it into admiration.
Mm.
So this was like 2008, the end of 2008. And he's a social media strategist, digital marketing strategist. And he said, why don't you start a blog? Because everybody had blogs at that time.
Mhm.
And he said, why don't you start a blog? And he's like, not for anybody else to read, but just for you, like make a visual bookmarks list, basically. Like
Mm.
capture all the stuff you love and figure out why you love it. Because I was trying all different things, and I was just jumping all over the place. I felt like a crazy person. And he's like, maybe, he's such a mathematician. He was like, maybe if you start actually documenting the work you like, you'll see a pattern emerge. Like maybe you'll see a consistent palette, or maybe you'll see a consistent theme or whatever, and it'll help you with your own work. And he also said, and it might help you not be so jealous and,
Mhm.
upset all the time. And I was like, oh, I will call it the Jealous Curator.
Yes.
And
Ooh.
he set it all up, and I just started writing daily posts, and I would write it in a really positive way. It's like, I love this person, and here's why. Um,
Mhm.
and really fast, I felt lighter, like I
Mm.
just felt like a relief, like, oh my God, okay. Like it did feel so much better to be positive than negative.
Mhm.
And I started really fast. Within the first month, I could see a theme in the
Mhm.
palettes. I could see a theme, like everything had a little bit of a wink to it. Everything had a bit of humor. And
Mhm.
so it really helped me start thinking about what I might want to make again.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
granted, it still took a long time, because then I was like, oh, now I'm too busy with the Jealous Curator. I can't make art.
Yes.
That was another
Yeah.
new good excuse not to make my art. So it's kind of
Yes.
been slow. Like I started, 2009, it launched February 2009. Here we are in 22. And
Mhm.
I really started making my own art again in probably the end of 2015, early 2016.
Okay.
It was a good 20 years after our art school.
Oh my goodness. So I think about how much trauma happens from art school, and what a testament to that this moment in this critique room that you kind of forgot about, but you didn't forget, how these comments and how much weight, how much responsibility our educators have that may not even realize
Hmm.
that a comment from an art teacher can turn somebody completely on a different path.
Yeah.
I think that's just really
I've talked
important.
to a lot of teachers about that, like when
Okay.
I do a lot of speaking, and if I am ever speaking to educators, I always say, like, I'm sure you guys realize this, but your words
Yes.
carry so much weight. And that doesn't mean you have to tell everyone they're amazing and, whatever, but it's like, choose your words carefully. Like,
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to, like, if they're, okay, my work probably wasn't very good, but figure out how to lift me up and aim me in a direction where my work might get better.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what the whole point is. But I know you had you had a similar experience in art school too, right?
Yes. So I had a professor, there's one in particular, and he was for my school, for the BFA program, we had a committee of three professors, and he was my first painting professor. So I was applying we had to apply for the program with a portfolio, then they had to accept your work, and I had all watercolor paintings when I applied. Did you hear that thunder? Of course, it's thundering
No,
outside of
I
my
didn't
studio.
hear it.
Why? Okay. Just for dramatic effect, I've added
Yeah,
thunder
that's right. We're talking
noises.
about art school. Of course, there's
Dun,
thunder and
dun,
lightning.
dun. Doom and gloom. A few things from art school. So we had this portfolio, we had to apply, and I had to pick three professors to be on my committee. He was my first professor, helped me make slides of my work for this portfolio review. And so I picked him, the other painting professor, and then I really wanted a female professor. In fact, the one I picked, he personally didn't like her. So he kind of steered me into the direction of a different female professor. Now that I realized that that was a manipulation, or just that he didn't personally like this one person. Anyway, I said, I really want a female perspective. So he said, well, I think this other one would be better. And she ended up leaving to go to culinary school. So I ended up with two professors. And he had said a lot of damaging things to other students. I know at one point well, for one, I was a watercolorist when I entered the program. I painted in watercolor. And then after taking some oil classes, in one of my reviews, because you'd have to get together with your committee once a semester or once a year to kind of look at your work before you graduated. And he said, watercolor or oil painting has ruined me as a watercolorist, and therefore I should never watercolor again. Like, you paint as an oil painter, you're not a watercolorist anymore. So I quit painting in watercolor, and I just started painting in watercolor about a year ago again, during 2020. Anyway, so because one day I realized, I'm curious about watercolor, and I really liked painting in watercolor. And so I was kind of dipping my toe back into that pond and realizing that I've been missing out. This is amazing. It's so different. It's so beautiful. He also said that my work is very playful. I know that you had talked before on a different podcast about how females shouldn't be humorous, or you shouldn't have humor in your work. And he said that my work has such a playful quality, like that was a bad thing. And now I'm just to the point where I'm realizing that that can be a real strength, or it can be a real strength to create something playful or cute or nice to look at. And there's room for all of us.
Yeah.
And I was definitely not the angsty art student. I didn't feel like I fit in because I was, like a quote unquote normal looking kid. That in the art school where everyone's wearing all black and angry, and living off of cigarettes and coffee. And I
Yeah.
just didn't fit that mold at all. I was just this joyful, happy person. And same same person as today. So it's been very healing for me to hear your story and to hear that similar things happen, that art school can be a very good place to go. And but it's also, there's a lot of things that come out of art school too. But then I love your story too, because you take jealousy and you look at it in a different lens and realize that let's celebrate these other artists, or let's talk about these things that I really appreciate, and how that has led you into other projects such as your books. I don't know if you want to talk about your books. I have
Yeah.
them here. I have three of them here.
What
This
have you got?
one, How to Spot an
Oh,
Artist, I highly recommend this book. It's a children's book, and I think every school should have this book. Every art teacher should have this book. Someday when I'm a bazillionaire artist, I'm gonna just buy them for all the schools. And then this one is Your Inner Critic is a Big Jerk. So I kind of want you to talk about those two books specifically, and how your experiences have led you onto this path of igniting creativity in others.
mhm. Well,
Yeah.
it happened in such a weird way. I was speaking at Alt Summit. They've just started it again. It was like a design blogging conference. And I went to that to speak, and a couple of years in a row. And I think that my blog was maybe 2 years old. And there was an editor there from Chronicle Books named Kate Woodrow. And she came up to me in a group and said, "Oh, are you the Jealous Curator?" Which was insane because I never showed my face on the blog or anything. So I don't know how she knew, but and so we started chatting, and she's like, "Oh, I really love your writing style. Would you ever consider writing a book?" And I was like, that's on my bucket list, like dream bucket list, right? And I was like, okay. But like I had no ideas of what I wanted to do or anything. So I was gonna be in San Francisco a few weeks later, and she said, "Would you like to come like basically and pitch a book?" So I was like, okay, quick, come up with a book idea. And I think I shouldn't speak for her, but I think what she thought I was gonna propose was like a coffee table book of my 200 favorite posts or whatever,
Mhm.
and it would be a beautiful
Mm.
art coffee table book. But at this time, I'd been having so many conversations with different artists about blocks and inner critics, because in that 15 or 20 years when I didn't do anything, I was very alone. I didn't talk to other artists. I thought all artists were mean because my art school experience was so bad.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that other people heard that little voice that told them to quit. I didn't know, like, a creative block to me, like if I didn't have an idea or I was trying to do something and it wasn't working, I didn't realize that that's just part of the process. Like that's just part of being an artist. To me, that meant, oh, that professor was right. I can't do this.
Mm.
So I just would give up. And so I'd been having all these conversations. So I went to San Francisco with this pitch and I said, I want to write a book called Creative Block. And I want it to be shaped like a block filled with creativity, but I want it to be about creative blocks. So I interviewed 50 artists from around the world, all different mediums, different training, some from New York, some from small town Australia. And it was a Q&A book. And I asked them how they dealt with creative blocks and inner critics. And that was like therapy for me. Like,
Mm.
I didn't even care if anyone even bought that book because I wanted to know those answers for me.
Mhm.
And it was amazing because all of these people are like full-time working artists. And all of them were like, oh yeah, I get blocked all the time. And I was like, what? And they were all like, oh yeah, I have an inner critic. I hear it every day. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. But the
Mhm.
difference between them and me is that they didn't quit. They would hear that voice
Oh.
and keep going, or they would get blocked and keep and push through it.
Mhm.
And so in the book, I asked each one of them to give an unblocking project, because they all had these like little things that they would do to get loose again, And so that thing was like therapy for me. I thought that would be like, ta-da, I wrote a book.
Yeah, done.
Did so well that Kate came back and said, you need to write another one. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll do a follow-up. I'll do another interview book. She's like, no, I think it's time for you to write a book.
Mm.
But I'm not a writer, because I grew up in such a university, like you go to university family, that
Mhm.
I was like, I'm not trained to be a writer. So
Mhm.
I can't do this. And Kate said, oh, yes, you can. So I did Your Inner Critic is a Big Jerk. And I remember sitting down to write it.
Oh, I love this book so much, Danielle. I love it.
I'm really proud of it too, but I love how it started, because I was like, this is not a Q&A book anymore. I am an author. I went and bought a hot pink notebook because I assumed
Yeah.
that's probably what authors had.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
also bought a fuzzy turtleneck sweater. My
Get out.
husband, he calls it the author sweater, because I'm like, I
Oh,
think an author would probably wear this.
well, yes.
And then I went to we live on a lake, and there's this beautiful restaurant that has like, this is like a little local restaurant, but they're right on the lake. And so I brought my laptop and my pink notebook and my sweater, cracked
Mm.
open, my laptop. I'm like, I'm about to write a book, everyone. And then Microsoft Word opened, and there was a big blank white rectangle with a tiny cursor. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this little cursor was just blinking. I remember looking at it and I just felt like it was going, fuck you. Like, you have no ideas. And I was just like,
Ah.
what have I done? I can't sit down and write a 10 chapter book. Like, what have I agreed to? I had a full panic attack in public, crying in this beautiful lakeside restaurant, thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to have to email them and say that I can't do it. And they're just going to have to rip up the contract. And, like, I just was like trying to figure out how to get out of this. And so instead, I just wrote my panic attack. And I'm like,
Mm.
here's what's happening. I am
Mhm.
freaking out, because it was very meta. Like, my inner critic was there with me saying, you cannot do this.
Mhm.
And so then the book kind of flowed from there, but it was supposed to be called Your Inner Critic is an Asshole.
Mm.
But then the bookstores wouldn't carry it, which is
Really?
so weird, because now there's tons of books with like
Yeah.
the F-bomb right in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
title.
yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
so we had to change it to Big Jerk.
Mm.
And so
I love
Martha
it.
Rich was illustrating it with me. And so we had to propose like 3 to 5 covers, I think. And so I said to Martha, what if we do a donkey on the front, like for the ass, as like a little nod to the fact that we wanted to call it asshole. And we couldn't believe it, but that was the cover that Chronicle chose.
Oh
So
my
we got our
gosh.
ass in there, whether we liked it, like whether they knew or not.
Yeah,
But
that's your little trick.
yeah, Chronicle was totally into calling it asshole. It was just like the big bookstore chain said no. But anyway, and then from there I wrote, Collage happened at the same time as Creative Block. That was crazy, doing 2 books at once. And then You're in a Critic is a Big Jerk.
This
And
one?
then I really, with all my books, I kind of look for not a hole in the market, but like a hole in my life. Like, what answers do I need?
Yes.
What questions do I have and what answers do I want? And I've been looking at all of my books, and I have like my laptop right now stacked up on a bunch of books, and I have all these big important art books that have almost no women in them. And I would, if you look at my blog, it's probably 85% women that I write about. Not really as a conscious choice. It's just like, that's what I love. And it's who I aspire to be as well. And then I was like, got really mad. I was like, why are there no women in any of these books? And this was 2017. This was right before the Me Too stuff happened. I pitched this book to 6 publishers and was turned down by 5 of them.
Get out.
2017, they said, I don't think anybody will read a book about female artists. I know.
Who told you? Was it a man or a woman?
Men. All of the editors who I pitched the book to were women, and they all wanted it. And I should say, Kate has now, she's not an editor anymore. She started her own literary agency. So I went with her. So she's my agent now. So she was the one would send it out to all the publishers. And all of the editors were women. They all came back, and Kate was like, oh my God, we're going to have a bidding war for this. Like everybody loves it. And then when they took it to their boards, which were a lot of white, older men, they just said, nah, I don't think it'll sell. Anyway, I did get picked up by Running Press, which out of Philly, which was so amazing. And they completely had my back on anything I wanted to do. And so the working title had been A Big Important Art Book Now with Women, because I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And they actually let me title the book that. And
I love it.
Yeah, so that was such a thrill to write. I got to interview all these amazing women, but I didn't do it as a Q&A. I actually got to write it, which and when I was finished, I went into like a little depression for a couple of months, because I was so sad not to be knee deep in their stories every day. It was such an amazing place to swim around, like just, talking to these women and following up with them to be like, oh, I had a question about this. And because I want to like beef up the story in this area, and just being surrounded by all these women all the time was just so cool. And I was so sad when it was done. And then the next thing was the kids book, because for all of these grown-up books, I have book tours, and I would go and do a little talk, sign some books, and everyone in the lineup, I would always just listen to their stories, right? And look for patterns. And the pattern that kept emerging was, oh, I haven't made art since I was a little kid, because teacher said, or a parent said, or a grandparent said, or whatever. I can't hear that thunder at all.
You can't. It's so dramatic. It's like you just said that, and it was like, and then I said, it's like, blah, blah, blah.
I wish I could hear it.
I mean, it seems fancy. Like,
I should
this
be
is
wearing
such a
a cape
dramatic
or
talk.
something.
I mean, it's dark out. Hopefully the power doesn't turn off.
Yeah, no,
I don't have a generator, so.
Oh no. Okay, well, I'll tell the story fast. But I just felt like everybody said it was always when they were 6, 7, or 8 that these things would happen. So I thought, well, I can write another grown-up book teaching people how to jumpstart their creativity after they'd quit for 20 years. Or I could scooch around to the front and talk to kids when they're 6, 7, or 8 and tell them, hey, if this ever happens, you don't have to quit. Like, I wish I had known that. And so that's how to Spot an Artist came about. And sadly, it came out in 2020. So there was no book tour. Everything got canceled. I still have not read that book. Like, at a bookstore in front of a group of children. Like I've done a few Zoom things, but like, it's just so sad. So I just finished my next kids book.
Okay.
It comes out in the spring of 23. Both of them are published by Prestel, which is distributed by Penguin Random House. So they're the same size, they're by the same publisher. So I can, when I do the book tour for this new one, I can read them both at the same time.
Yes.
And so I'm right now just about to start planning like a really big book tour all over Canada and the US, hopefully a little bit of Europe too, so that I can actually read these books in front of human children
Mm.
and, put that little seed in their head that they can just make stuff, and that is, nobody should stop them.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry that I've already had this experience with your book before you got to, because I
I
messaged you that day. It was mystery read March's reading month at our school. And I said, I have to bring Danielle's book in. And I read it to my two daughters were in elementary school last year, read it to their classes, third grade and fifth grade. And it was very well received. And even my third grade teacher, she's a friend of mine, she said, I'm buying this book. I need to buy it and have it for my students. And it was just really cool. We had really great conversations after reading the book and talking about it, and talking about, as an artist reading it to the class, talking about, what kind of art do you guys like to create? And art looks like so many different things now. Do you make TikTok videos? I mean, that's art when you make those dances and all the things. So, what a gift. I mean, Dan, truly, what a gift to the world these books are, because yes, you're catching kiddos when they're young. And also for any adult who thinks that they have creativity inside of them, which everybody does, they
Yeah.
need to read this book, because there's so many practical, different types of things that, different ideas that you can pursue. Is it like every chapter has some kind of assignment at the end or something?
Yeah, in Big Jerk, I tried to put like a little like yeah,
Prompt.
just the little prompts all throughout. I kind of do that in everything I do. I
Yes.
always want to give people prompts because
Yes.
like my newsletter has prompts every Wednesday.
Mhm.
I just find like that's what stopped me was once you get out of art school or high school or whatever, sometimes a blank page can be absolutely terrifying because the possibilities are endless. Like, what should you put on that blank page?
Mhm.
And in school, you get
Yes.
assignments. And when you get out, you're like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so giving people prompts is like such a fun way to like, even if the prompt is blue,
Mhm.
okay, now I've got a starting place, you
Mhm.
know? And so I always try and give, because that's what I was missing, in those years when I really wanted to start making again, but I had no idea what
Mhm.
or how or where. So yeah, I always give them. So Big Jerk has lots of them throughout.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
illustrations. I love, because I have book ideas inside of me too. And but to say I'm creating a book for an adult that has illustrations in it, I think that's wonderful, because it really opens up the idea of what is a book? What is a book for adults? Why couldn't it have illustrations in it? Why not have, I just think it enhances what you have in there so much more. And to read your writing is so fun, because I hear your voice. I get your sense of humor and your whimsy. Um, and I think that's so amazing. And it definitely shows artists. Something I did want to mention with you is the idea of being multi-passionate. And why not be somebody who has a blog, who happens to write, who had a gorgeous recent fine art show, who gave a TED talk, who how do you conquer that, Danielle? How, especially as a parent? I know for me, um, my husband's an engineer, and he comes home from work, and I say, "Oh, I decided I want to start a podcast." And then now he knows better, because we've been together long enough. He looks at me very carefully, like thinking, "Okay, I'm calculating how much time you have in the day. I don't
Yeah.
understand. I don't understand A, why you want to do that, and B, can I say anything? Should I?" How do you maneuver that when you get these ideas for these projects that you're so excited you have to do it? You realize now that this is important and I need to do it. How do you overcome that voice in your head that says, "Well, gee, shouldn't you stay in your lane? Shouldn't you continue to do the one thing that you're really good at?" How do you overcome that?
I don't think I've ever thought that.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, I don't. Um, I mean, I had such a hard time getting started that I think now, to me, they all kind of overlap. Like
Mhm.
I mean, I certainly have doubts. Like when I first started writing the books, I was like, what? Like, this is
Yeah.
so out of my wheelhouse. But I had really good people in my corner saying, like my editor and my husband saying, you could totally do it. My dad.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay. I really didn't want to do a podcast. My husband really pushed me to do the podcast, and
Mhm.
I was like, well, it sounds like a lot of work, and it sounds like really techie, and I don't know how to be techie. And he's like, I'll set it all up. And he said, just think. He said, it's making art friends all day long.
Mhm.
And he knows that I like making art friends.
Mhm.
So that's how he
Yes.
hooked me. Um, so for me, they kind of all overlap. But as far as like, I really have to be very like anal about my time, because
Mm.
there was a while there where I just felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown, because um I'd be working on the book, but then I'd be feeling guilty that I wasn't with my son, or I'd be feeling guilty that I wasn't making art, or I was designing still at the same time. So I had a full-time job. And so I just felt really pulled in a whole bunch of directions. And
Mhm.
I just was constantly feeling guilt about something, as
Mhm.
women so often do.
Mhm.
And so then I just started scheduling, like hardcore scheduling. So
Mm.
if it was book day was Tuesdays and Thursdays
Mhm.
when I was actually working on something. And on those days we would get takeout.
Mhm.
So I didn't have to worry about dinner. You know, my
Mhm.
husband would go pick it up and it was just takeout night. And I would not allow myself to be like, I should also be in the studio. It's like, well,
Mm.
no, I shouldn't. It's book day,
Mhm.
you know. And then the days I would give myself for art, it was like, this is, you know, this is my art afternoon, and I don't even have to think about the book, you know, or
Mhm.
whatever. And like I'd spend the morning with my son, and you know, now that he's 16, he could care less where I
Yeah.
am. But you
Yep.
know, when he was littler, and so I still do that. Like I still have to be like really, really break it up. Otherwise, I just feel like a crazy person.
Yeah. Wow, thank you. That helped me a lot because now that I'm the past year I've taken on the podcast and now I have new projects coming up. I'm teaching an online course and it does make me feel crazy. So that really
Yeah.
helps me hearing
How
that
old
from you.
how old are your girls?
They're 14, 12, and 9. So
Okay, so that's busy.
yeah, and they're all playing soccer right now.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
doing all the sports and I really value my time with my family, so I'm okay with making the time to be with them. I work a lot at night. I work weird
Yeah.
hours or in between this and that and soccer practice tonight. I'm going to be working in my car a little bit, which is fine. Like you just kind of
Yeah.
fix it and make it work, but
Totally. And like when I say, you know, Tuesdays and Thursdays were book day, like some people don't have like that chunk.
mhm.
Because when I was designing, I wasn't going to an office, I was doing freelance stuff. So I was at
Mhm.
home, so I could kind of make those hours. So if you
Mhm.
can't make those hours, one of my favorite stories about scheduling is this guy I met when I was teaching a collage class one time. And he was probably in his 50s, late 50s, and he owned a sign making company.
Mhm.
And he said, but he was an amazing collage artist, but he had his own business to run. And so he said
Mhm.
what he did, he worked like 8 till 5 or whatever it was. He said he would get home. He had 2 or 3 kids. He had his studio set up in his garage. So he would get home at 5. He would go into the studio. He didn't even go into his house.
Mm.
He would go into the studio from 5 till 6, just an hour.
Okay.
And at 6, he would go into the house, and now he was home from work.
Mm.
And then he would help with dinner, help with homework, do whatever, and not go
Mhm.
back into the studio because he had his 1 hour. But it was consistent. It was every day.
Mhm.
Nobody went in there until 6 o'clock because it was that was, you know, he wasn't home yet. He wasn't home
Okay.
until 6.
Oh,
And
that's
I thought
good.
that was so smart. And, you know, people feel like, oh, I need one of the big excuses people use is, well, I need like a 10-hour runway.
Yes.
I need 2 weeks. And it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
If you can carve out half an hour every morning and cut out a few things, or, you know, paint a few strokes or what, and then come back to it the next day and make it part of your process. Like
Mm-hmm.
then you can be creative every single day and not
Mm-hmm.
let that little excuse sneak in there.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, even
Mhm.
30, yeah, 30 minutes is good. 20 minutes is fine. You
Yeah.
know.
And I say that with people that have new babies and stuff where they
Mm-hmm.
just feel like, "Oh my God, my life is not my own and I'm never gonna make again." What I suggest for that, I always say is like, have a notebook, have a beautiful little notebook, and 15 minutes every day, either just write down ideas for 15 minutes, like set your timer. You
Mm-hmm.
have 15 minutes. The baby is asleep or they're
Mm-hmm.
nursing or whatever it is. For 15 minutes, just write down ideas, do doodles, whatever, close up the book. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Being having a newborn is such a blur. I
Mm-hmm.
did this. And when I looked at that book like 2 years later, when, I actually had a little bit more time to myself, I went back. I couldn't remember writing any of that down.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was like, I'm a fucking genius. Look at all this brilliance. Because
Yes.
I didn't even remember, but because I made it a daily practice. And then that way, when he's 3 and he starts going to preschool, I've got this treasure trove
Mm-hmm.
of ideas that are mine. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, where should I jump in? And so at least you might not be making during that time. Maybe you can find a way to do it. Lots of people do. But like me, I could not find a time to actually make. So just keep those ideas, make this little treasure trove for yourself so that when the kid is busy and has no time for you, you're not starting
Mhm.
from scratch. You're starting with this amazing list of,
Yes.
places to start from.
Oh, I love that. It's
Yeah.
like everything is in there,
Yeah.
right?
And
All
they're
the
all your
things.
ideas, and you probably won't remember any of it because you were so sleep deprived.
Yeah. Ooh, and just to have that release where you're not bottling it up inside, where you feel
Yes.
like at least I'm locking it onto paper so that in the future. One thing,
Yeah.
okay, it's 1 o'clock. So how much time do
Okay.
you have, Danielle?
I can
Um,
hear my husband. He's starting another meeting, so I probably should go soon. But
okay.
okay, yes.
Okay, okay. All right. You just had your time in Italy and your TED Talk and your show. And I will say, I have really enjoyed your podcast. I know that you were kind of taking a little bit of a break. Is there a
Yes.
chance that you're going to have more episodes coming out? What do you think?
I mean, I have a bunch of people tentatively booked because every time I went to Italy, I went to Nashville for the TED Talk. I meet amazing people who I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I
Yes.
want to hear their stories. I'm
Yeah.
like, you should come on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I have like 5 or 6 people that I want to talk to. Um, but like life has been crazy. I packed up all this art for I had an art show in Nashville, packed everything up at the very end of July, shipped it, got on a
Mm-hmm.
plane to Italy, was in Italy for 2.5 weeks to teach this course, came back, was home for 2 days, went to Nashville, did the TED Talk, came home, school started, like all for Charlie. And
Mm-hmm.
then we have a puppy. So our whole
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and so and because of Venice, I have so many new ideas for artwork. And I
Yes.
just want to be doing that. And so the podcast is, yeah, it's kind of on the back burner. It's
Yeah.
not gone, but
Yeah, it's
I
not going
can't promise when it's
anywhere.
coming back.
You have so many episodes. I will say your podcast is so well done. And the conversations, I love every episode you have with like Ashley Longshore and
She's going to
Andy.
come back on. Yeah.
She is. I feel so inspired. She's one of my favorites. Andy J. Pizza. He's always so fun to listen to. And so I definitely feel like I recently just talked to Kat Popova of the Art
Oh,
Queens,
yeah.
and I feel like, getting to know her through the Art Queens, she's helped me with quite a few things with my career. And one piece of advice she said to me about the podcast is to think about it as, these are your friends. Like you're gonna, if you take a little break, your friends will understand. And if you come back, it's like you never left off. It's totally fine to have those. It's not like it's your thing. So if you come back once in a while, I don't think there are no rules. So you can,
Yeah. Yeah. I had such a schedule. Like it was every weekend
yes.
and it was so intense that like my whole life was this
Yeah.
podcast. And it was like, that's not like, I
Yeah.
love it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it takes up I calculated probably about 24 hours
Yeah.
a week, because
Yeah.
I do a big post that goes with it and
Yeah.
everything. And it's just like, I don't have that time right now.
Mhm.
After my dad died, unexpected, like shockingly, a couple of years ago, I stopped the podcast for
Mhm.
maybe 9 months. I just couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
I just had nothing,
Yeah.
um, and when I did come back, everybody was right there with me, which
Yeah,
was so
absolutely.
amazing, and I think I'm at 227
Yeah.
episodes right now. So I feel
Mhm.
like I'm really proud of the canon that
Yes.
I've created, I
Yes.
feel like it there's such a wealth of information. Like the people that
Yes.
I've interviewed are such smart, like they've given such wise advice, and I'm so
Mhm.
proud that that
Mhm.
exists. So I feel like if I, when I find, like I meet somebody cool in Venice, I'm like, come on the podcast. It might not be once a week, it might be like random.
Yeah.
There's a
There's
new
so much
episode.
there. It's there
Yeah.
forever. It's not like if you post it on Instagram and it's gone in 24 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's there. It is something to be so proud of. And it's wonderful. I love listening to those conversations and the coaching that you receive from Peter Coyne. Those
Yes.
episodes like before your show and then after. What a beautiful way to showcase mentorship between artists. I think that's so inspiring.
She has
Mm,
been like a life-changing relationship, meeting her and like having her take an interest in what I'm doing, like in my own artwork. I really have never had that. And she's just such a constant, like amazing presence. And I'm just
mhm.
so, and we've never actually met in real life.
Really?
No, because she's
Wow.
in New York, and this is all started at the beginning of COVID. So the first place I'm going to schedule my kids' book tour is New York, mainly so I can go and actually hug PETA in person.
I hope you come to Michigan. Come to
I'll
Michigan.
come anywhere. I'll go
Beautiful
anywhere. If
here.
a bookstore will have me, I'll come.
Okay. I'm gonna line that up.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Do you have time for, oh my gosh, there's so many questions, Danielle.
My
Okay.
husband just texted and said his meeting got canceled. So we're
Oh,
good.
really?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yep.
this is amazing. Okay. What do you have? You have your book coming out and you have ideas for another show. And I know that you would love to. I know at one point you talked about having a show in Italy. Is there any exciting announcement you want to share that you have coming up?
Sadly, no. Um, yeah, I was just telling somebody yesterday, I have this idea for like, it's a new body of work, but it's an evolution of what I've been doing with the
Mhm,
cigarette butts and the broken ceramics and broken jewelry, so it's an evolution from there. But I have no invite to a gallery. Like I have no there's
mhm.
there's nowhere where this artwork is going to live, but I just can't not make it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like field of dreams, build it and they will come. That's my theory. So I'm just gonna, and I've learned that from PETA. She's like, don't worry about that stuff, just make it, and
Mhm,
a place to show it will show up, right? So I'm just gonna push forward with making this stuff. Right now the big thing is the kids book. So I
mhm,
just sent in the final designs on Friday.
mhm,
So it's done. It's going to the printer in the next couple of weeks. And then there's nothing for me to do. It comes out in March. So that's kind of being baked in an oven somewhere else, which is
mm,
great.
mhm,
So I kind of want to take the winter to just play with this new work because it's porcelain.
mm,
And so I took this, I've always wanted to do a pottery wheel class, like a
mm.
throwing, and a friend of mine in the next town over just opened a pottery studio where she teaches classes. So I signed up for that. Well, I threw up for 5 days afterwards. I got so motion sick.
Really?
Yeah.
Wha Really? I've never heard of that.
Neither had she. She was like, "What are you even talking about?" I got home from that class and just threw up.
Maybe you had the
And
flu.
no, it was from looking down at the thing.
Oh.
And I'm not good in cars and planes, and like
Mm.
I'm just a motion sick person. And turns out I cannot make a mug on a wheel because I will be sick. So I said to her, I didn't want to stop going. It was like 5 weeks of this class. And I'm like, can I just come back and hand build a mug? And she said, yeah, sure. Well, I got completely addicted to that.
Mm.
And I've only done air dry clay. And so, seeing like glazing stuff and having it come out of the kiln, I was like, oh
Magic.
my God. So when I was in Venice, I was having all these ideas. So I'm messaging her on Facebook from Venice going, hey, if I did this and this and this, would that work? And anyway, I'm going to her studio tomorrow to discuss a deal where I can pay her a fee to come however many times a month and use the kiln and pay her for glazes and clay. And so I've got this whole plan.
I
I
love
don't know
it.
if it'll work. So that's why I'm going to go in tomorrow and just play around and see if I can make these things that I think I can make.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just, it's time to experiment again. And
Mhm.
I think that's what this winter will be, is just experimenting and pushing my ideas a little bit further. And one of the things, I just said this in my newsletter for Motivation Monday, one of the things I wrote down in Venice on my very first day, I think, I always have a notebook and I go have a fancy coffee and I write down sort of where my head is at the beginning of the course.
Mm.
And I just wrote in all capitals, say the stuff. And that's what this series is going to be about, is like, there's a lot of things I want to say about equality, and a lot of it comes from the Me Too, movement. I was in an abusive relationship in my 20s and I just kind of packed it down and never said, hey, don't, like, this is not acceptable. I will not be treated this way. And so I've been trying to figure out a way. My art right now tiptoes around that, but I don't really just say the stuff, because I think I've been taught to be a good girl and not rock
Mhm.
the boat and not stir things up, and kind of tired of that. And I kind of want to say the stuff and stir things up, but in
Mm.
my way. So I want there to
Mhm.
be a bit of humor. I still want the work to be beautiful, but I
Mhm.
want to say the stuff. And
Ooh.
I'm not sure exactly what that looks like right now. And in the past, I would panic and be like, oh, I don't know what it looks like. And
Mhm.
PETA has taught me that that is perfectly fine, and that playing around for 6 months is actually a really short amount of time. She
Mhm.
actually is like, you should be playing around for something for a year or two before you produce any real work
Whoa.
from that thing. And I'm
Wow.
like, a year or two? Do you know what that is in Instagram years? That's like, you know,
How many posts is
and
that?
so
Right?
I did that because it was sort of during COVID. So for the big, beautiful show I had in last spring, that was like a year and a half of experimenting and taking things apart and putting them back together in a different way and trying this and trying that and pulling back. And I've never allowed myself to do that. And it was the biggest development I have had as an artist, because I allowed myself the time and space to play. And so that's what this winter is going to be, is just trying these new things, trying out these new ideas, trying out this new language of saying the things I want to say in my way. So yeah, that's kind of where I
Mm.
am. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'm so excited. I feel like one of the things I loved about those episodes with PETA was that your art was the subject of the podcast episode. I just wonder how much more as an audience member, you talking about this, I'm just drawn right in. I can't wait for for next week's episode, next week's chapter where you talk about it a little more. And I encourage you to think about your podcast possibly in that kind of way of, it's okay to use that as a vehicle to talk about your art, because now I'm so intrigued by what is Danielle's art gonna, what is it gonna be like? What's a new, what are you working on? What are you playing with? And exactly what you talked
Mhm.
about, I feel like that could be a 10 to 15-minute episode of, hey, I'm just checking in with you guys, and this is what I've discovered this week in my studio. This is kind of what I'm working on, just as an easy 10 to 15, like I said, it doesn't have to be long, but just as a way of keeping us all in the loop, because I don't know if I
Mhm.
can wait a year or 6 months for the show.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
And
exactly.
maybe that's too much, or maybe you don't feel like sharing in that way, but I'm already like, Okay, tell me more.
Well, that is exactly what Andy J. Pizza said. He messaged me the other day and he's like, I really think you could just talk about what you're doing for,
Yeah,
like they don't have to be hour and a half long. They can be like half an hour,
yeah,
15 minutes, and they can be about you. I think it's because Jealous Curator has been about
other people.
other artists
Yeah,
for 13 years that I don't it feels really weird to talk about myself. And like PETA, it was her idea to do those 2 episodes where she
yeah.
talked about like where she interviewed me.
Mhm.
And I felt really uncomfortable.
Or
You know,
what
I
if
was
it
like,
was like
oh, what?
coffee with 2 friends? Like
Yeah.
having a coffee and saying, because I love this idea. This is how I think about my podcast is we're just here having coffee and we're just chatting about, well, what's going on in your studio this week, Danielle? Tell me about what you're doing. And
Yeah.
I know that my viewers respond really well to that, that I'm incorporating that more into my show, where at the beginning of the episode, I'm kind of saying, well, this week I'm finishing up this commission and I'm starting
Mm.
this, or I'm, producing this calendar for next year or whatever. And I think that it's a really cool way to add that human element and to let them, if they don't get a chance to read your newsletter, they can hear it via, I mean,
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah. That's
Audible
a really
format.
good idea.
Yeah.
I think I've got like an inner critic thing about it because if I ever post my own work on,
Hmm.
so I have 2 Instagrams. I have the Jealous Curator, but I also have my own art one. And if I ever post any of my own art on Jealous Curator, um, I lose followers.
Well, do you lose
And so
followers
I
anyway? Do you feel like
what?
do you lose followers for random other, I mean, I lose followers all the time. You lose
Yeah,
them, you
I don't
gain
know. I just
some.
have seen a correlation. So I think it makes me be like, oh, I shouldn't be talking about my stuff. So I think it's like an inner critic thing, right?
Mhm.
Like, but
That's
at the
just
same time, I
funny.
want to tell you guys, I want to
Yeah.
share this stuff and tell everybody. And
Those aren't
but
your
no, I
people.
really like that idea actually. I think and I think it would actually help me to talk about my art. Like when I do like just the questions you've been asking, it
Mhm.
helps me kind of think through what is next as opposed to just having it alone in my head,
Mhm. Well,
you
if you
know?
ever need to have coffee, I'm here next
I got a
week.
giant one right here.
Oh, me too. Look at this mug. Do you watch The Office?
Yes. Oh my God, that's
I
amazing.
totally bought it for myself. I was like, yes, I
Just
bought
like
this
Michael
for my,
Scott.
just like,
Michael Scott
I
bought it
know
for
I'm
himself
showing
too.
everybody in my family and they're like, you don't even have employees, mom. I'm like, yes, I do
It's
myself.
you guys.
It's
Yeah.
the dog. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. No, they're terrible employees. No, actually, my oldest has helped me. She's kind of my first employee, but they wouldn't say I'm the world's best. Anyway, if you ever need an artist friend to have coffee with and talk about what you're doing that week, I think that's so cool. And I mean, Danielle, you have all of these. We're just so. I'm just here cheering you on. Also knowing your whole backstory and seeing this journey that you've been on, and this is your moment. This is where you get to create and honor those nudges. I love that so much. So,
Me too.
real quick before we get off, I wanted to mention your newsletter
Mm.
because I love it so much. I love what you pick. I mean, you're really good at picking artists, and you have a level of whimsy. You have that humor, and to kind of I think for people, so my goal is to blur the line between the art world and the non-art world because I
Yeah.
feel like as an artist, I've been in this bubble, even in art school. I had a professor tell me, oh, this is during my when I graduated, had my thesis show, and I had a little postpartum meeting with my committee, and my one professor said, after your BFA show that was very well attended, your audience is only going to shrink now. And you've been in this art world bubble, and you'll never experience this level of success having an art exhibition. And statistically, 99% of you guys graduating with the BFA are never going to make art again, which is total garbage. Like, if I had a doctor tell me that 99% of the people who went through your procedure died the next day, I probably wouldn't
Yeah.
have had the surgery, right? So
Yeah.
I was super like, what the fuck? Really? I'm
Yeah.
still thinking about this conversation. I realized like maybe I am the 1% or maybe you're not doing your job. Like, come on.
Yeah. No kidding.
Anyway, Where was I going with that? So I feel like there's this whole bubble of the art world, and you have people who know about art and people who talk about art. And then you have these, and maybe I'm thinking mostly about the US, but I know culturally, there are people that look at art, and then there's all these people over here that don't. So my goal is to blur those lines and to have, if you're interested in art as a topic, how do you get immersed into the art world? How do you learn about new artists? How do you learn about contemporary artists? Or how do you even think about looking at art? And I love your newsletter so much because I believe that you have a way of taking away any kind of, and I'm not diminishing your artist by any means, but I'm saying you have a way of making it approachable and not like, here's us over here in the art world and here are you guys. Like, you have a way
Yeah.
of making it accessible, I would say, for
Yeah,
all.
I've worked real like it's so funny because when I wrote my first post, I minored in art history. And so,
Mm,
it's all that academic talk of
yes.
art,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
society, blah, blah, blah. And you
Yeah.
instantly alienate a
Yes.
huge number of people.
Yes.
And so the first post I wrote on Jealous Curator, I wrote it like that because I was trying to sound like I knew what I was talking about, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I did my first post, hit publish. Of course, nobody it's you're writing into a vacuum when you
Right,
first
right,
start.
right.
So I showed my husband. I'm like, look, I wrote the first post. And he was like, oh, no, 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 no. And I was like, what? He goes, don't like, he said, that sounds like a textbook. And he said, write it the way you talk. Because he said, you make it so fun and
Mm-hmm.
like that anybody could understand what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. Don't write it like one of those really like highfalutin artist statements. Like write it like you talk. And so I always say, like, if I see art and my first thought is sweet Jiminy, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I write, sweet Jiminy, I love this.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's how people think, right? You
Mm-hmm.
could be like, upon gazing on this piece, I felt an overwhelming, but I could do that. Or you can just write like a human.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it makes it, yeah, it makes it more accessible. And I mean, I went to art school and I was terrified to go to gallery openings because I felt like I didn't know enough
Yeah.
or I couldn't speak the language. And so I was terrified to be in those environments, which is crazy. And I know so many people, white walled galleries, they are intimidating.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to demystify that as well. And if you love art, you love art. You don't have to you don't have to have like a big spiel about it. You can just love it because you love it, the
Mm-hmm.
end. And so that's how I've written all my books. They're very conversational. They're
Mm-hmm.
very just people talking about
Mm-hmm.
stuff they love. And thank you for saying that. That makes me very happy. And the same with the newsletter. I just wanted it to be like accessible art showing up in people's inboxes, because inboxes are filled with so much
Yeah.
junk
Yeah.
that we might as well have it, some beautiful art show up. And
Yeah.
I also find the reason I started doing it was because people stopped coming to my actual blog because
Mm.
blogs were all the rage for the longest time. And then people got busy.
Mm-hmm.
So they just do Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they'll click through to the artist's site, but maybe they won't. And I just found and then people were going to Twitter and then they were on Facebook and they were on Pinterest. And it was like, oh my God, I don't have time to go to all these places. And so I thought, well, what if I just package it all up for you and drop it in your inbox? You don't have to go anywhere. It's going to show up on your phone or in your inbox on your desktop. And it's like there. And they're short, you get
Mm-hmm.
your little hit of art and you move on with your day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, because I was getting frustrated of going to a billion places to post all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, I'll just put it all in one spot. And yeah, it's going really well.
I love it. I'm a subscriber,
Yeah.
and it just puts a big smile on my face. And it is so nice to open it and to not only look at art, but yeah, I love reading what you write. And it gives me a really good moment of, yeah, it's just it's uplifting. And
Yeah.
how do people subscribe to that? How does that work?
So it's through Substack, and Substack only started, like I jumped on it right away, because I just thought it was a cool way of doing things. So you can subscribe. I don't even know what to say the link is.
We'll provide the link somewhere. We'll figure it
Okay,
out.
I have it in my like if you go to my Instagram, which is the Jealous Curator, it's in my bio links.
Okay.
There's a direct link to sign up. So it's $3 a month if you pay for the year. I wanted it to be $3 a month no matter what, but Substack, the lowest you can do is $5 a month. So, but I could be sneaky, and I typed in 36 annually, and that worked. So if you pay 36 annually, you can get it for $3 a month, which is like 24 cents per issue. And I always say $3 a month. That's like giving up one badly made latte a month.
Yeah.
That's all you have to give up. And then there's also, you can subscribe to it for free, but that you only get the Saturday email. If you pay the $3 a month, then you get Monday through Saturday.
Yeah.
It's
worth it. I love it. It's so good.
Well, I want it to be super affordable because all of my people are artists, and I know you'd all rather spend money on paper and gouache, as would I. So I wanted it to be super affordable. So I thought, well, if they could give up one coffee for me. And then also I talk a lot about worth, especially for women artists. I find like we're quick to give discounts on our paintings, or we're quick to like just give stuff away. Oh, you can just have it. You can just have, like, I'm so guilty of that. And I've kind of been doing that with my art content, right? It's just like, here's all this stuff. And I'm running around telling everyone else to see their worth and their value and to charge what they deserve. And then I wasn't doing it. So I thought, when Substack came along, I thought, well, if people really want extra content, that's why it's called the No Such Thing as Too Much Art Society. Because
I love that.
I believe there's no such thing as too much art. And if you also believe there's no such thing as too much art, then I thought, well, $3 a month isn't too much to ask. And those are the people that like can't get enough of it, just like me. And they'll understand that there's value in how hard I'm working to produce all that content, right? So it's partly me standing up going, yeah, what I do is worth something. So
it's super cool. And you are helping artists. Like I know that you have art that has sold where people buy the art that's featured in the newsletter. And that's such a great feeling for you, connecting people and collectors. I know I'm friends with.
That is literally my favorite thing. I just got an email from somebody saying, oh my God, I just sold like 2 paintings because you put me in your newsletter. And like that is, I think half the time I'm more excited than them. Like it's such, I feel like it's a superpower to be that matchmaker, you know, that connected these two. And yeah, I love it when that happens. And it's happening more and more, you know?
Yes. I'm friends with Celine Gabrielle, and I've gotten to know her through the Art Queens. And so just to have a connection between her and Ashley Longshore, and then have a commission with Ashley. I mean, I just think that's amazing. You're like I don't want to say fairy godmother, but that's just, it's just magical. And
I get that a lot. Fairy art mother. I'm like, I will take that title. I'll put that on my business cards. I love that. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So Danielle, do you have time for a rapid round, like 5 minutes?
Of course I do.
I'm getting really greedy. I told you I could just talk to you all day. Oh my gosh. Okay. So absolutely no judgment at all. And I know a lot of my listeners know you and want to know more about you. And these are the questions that matter the most. So,
okay.
Top of mind, absolutely no judgment. What is your favorite color?
Pink.
Yes, mine too. Okay. What shade of pink?
Not quite this, more like a powdery blush pink.
Okay.
My grandmother she was an Avon lady, and she had a little room in her house called the Avon room, where she would put all the leftover makeup that hadn't sold. And the walls of it were this light blush pink, like, 1960s blush pink. And the room smelled like old lipstick and perfume. So when I think of that color, there's all this other sensory stuff that comes with that color for me. And actually, that was one of my aha moments was, when I was in Nashville, when I put up that show. So I did the TED Talk, and then I also had an art show at the same time. Anyway, and I was saying to the gallerist, I said, I would love to do a show that's just completely pink. Like all the work is pink. And he was like, do it. And I said, well, the funny thing is if a man did that, if a male artist did a show that was entirely like shades of pink, hot pink, blush, people would be like, avant-garde. If a woman did it, it would be like, oh, it's a bit girly.
Yeah.
And he kind of called bullshit on me and said, just do it. Like, just do it. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I'm going to do with this porcelain stuff. I think I'm just going to go all cuckoo pink and
Mm-hmm.
just see what happens. But that was a very long answer for your rapid. What is your
I
favorite?
love it. No,
Yeah.
and I can picture the little, because my grandma had Avon too, the little heart compact with the yellow, like it's kind of like chapstick, but it was like perfume.
Perfume? Yeah,
Yeah,
had it.
I can
And
smell
do you
it in my
remember the
mind.
little tiny white sample lipsticks?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you could get like a little pack of 5 and they were these
Mhm.
tiny little white sample things. And so my Grammy had like walls full of these things, and me and my sister would just go in there and oh my God, it was like a treasure trove of Avon.
Mm.
So that's what pink is for me. When my Grammy was dying, she had cancer. She was sort of in and out of consciousness. And at one point she was super lucid and she said, I just saw my spirit and it's pink. And she said, watch for me in pink. And after she passed away, all sorts of crazy pink things happened. Like a white flowering bush that my mom had bloomed pink, one pink bloom
What?
instead of white. And like just weird things like that. So I
Yeah.
always feel like if there's pink around, I feel like she's part of the work.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh man, I feel like this is a whole nother side conversation. 'Cause I
I
have
know.
like hearts that I see. It reminds me of so and so. And yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love that. Your grandma
There's
sounds really
something in
cool.
that. I think that, and it's so cool when you can harness those things and put them
Yes.
into your art. It gives your work and even if nobody ever knows what the pink means, I
Mm-hmm.
do, and if nobody knows what the hearts mean in yours,
Yeah.
so like, and
There's
I
a
think
heart in
there's
every
something really
painting.
powerful in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. It's like
Mhm.
it's their little kiss on it, right?
Yeah, it just adds richness to everything that you're
Mhm.
doing, and you know that they're with you.
Yes. Oh, I believe in that wholeheartedly. Again, that would make for a great episode to talk about all the cool spirit things.
Yeah.
Okay, Danielle. So many fun side conversations here. Work beverage of choice for you.
Oh God, coffee.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real problem.
I love
Honey, I
coffee.
can't eat sugar, so with honey and soy cream. It's a
Okay.
delicious combination.
That's
And
specific.
it's a problem. Yeah, I drink way too much of it.
It's so good though.
Yeah.
All right. Aside from all of your amazing books, do you have a book or movie mention that you want to bring up that has it could be something you love or has impacted you? It doesn't have to be, yeah.
Sure. I'm sure all of your listeners know about The Artist's Way.
Yes.
Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. So I did that. That was what prompted starting the Jealous Curator as well.
Mm,
It was very healing. I mean, I cried a lot. It kind of felt like I had this art school scab that I had just like left alone for a really long time. And I just felt like I just said to my husband in chapter 1, I was like, oh, I feel like I'm picking at a scab that I would rather just leave alone, but I knew that I had to heal.
mm-hmm.
And that book really helped. I mean, it has a kooky element to it that you kind of have to ignore and,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
flip past, but it's so helpful. And one of the movies I love so much, I've watched it like 5 times, is the Wayne White documentary, Beauty is Embarrassing.
Ooh,
Have you not seen that?
no.
Oh my God, you will love it.
I
It's
probably live
so
under a rock.
It's so good. He's one of my favorite artists, one of my favorite people. And he was a reluctant subject of this documentary. It was his friend that directed it that really wanted to do this documentary. And Wayne's like, it's so weird. Why is like I'm not dead? Why is there a documentary about me? It's so good. I just
Mm.
love him. And there's so many so many aha moments, so many goosebump moments in it. And yeah, I've watched it like 5 times.
Oh my goodness. I need to
Yeah.
watch it.
Yeah,
Thank you
highly
so
recommend
much.
it. I think it was on Netflix for a while. I don't know if it's on there right now, but it's pretty easy to track down.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. All right. Some people get their ideas from the shower. I get mine while I'm driving around in my car without my kids, but just like driving around aimlessly. Where do you get your ideas? Where does the
Um,
inspiration strike?
2 places. Running.
Okay.
I'm a runner. I'm a very slow runner, but I can run forever,
Mm,
just not quickly. So a lot of my ideas come when I'm running.
hmm
I also actually, that helps me run because if I think about running, then I want to die. So when I start the run, I give myself a creative problem.
Oh.
And then I just try and solve it by the time I'm back at my car.
Mhm.
And it usually works. And then that way I'm not thinking about my breathing and how tired I
Mhm.
am. I'm thinking about, and then I end up, it's like a win-win. I end up
Mhm.
solving the problem and I get a run in. And then the other place is thrift shops. If
Really?
I'm in a funk, I don't even have to buy anything. I just have to go and wander around a thrift shop for half an hour. And I think it's the smell of the mothballs and I don't
Yeah.
know what it is. It's like some little tchotchke will give me an idea, or finding an old book. Even if I, again, like, even if I don't buy it, I'll be like, oh, ooh, it just sparks stuff for me. I was
Mm.
saying to my husband one time, because during COVID, at the beginning of the lockdown, I was quite happy to not leave my house. Like, I'm really good at not leaving my house. But I was starting to get a little anxious and I couldn't figure out why. Because I'm like, I love being at home. And then I realized it's because all the thrift shops were closed. And I was like,
Mm.
I have not wandered around. And so finally, when they reopened, I went with my mask and my hand sanitizer and was just, I said to him when I got home, I said, oh my God, I felt like that was like my church. I just
Mm.
needed to go there. So yeah, running and thrift shops.
Okay.
What if I ran through a thrift shop? Wow.
Oh, you
And
might
then
trip. You're gonna trip
imagine
over
the,
something. That's
yeah,
dangerous.
yeah,
The floor, like there's just stuff everywhere.
yeah, that's right. Okay, I
Oh,
won't.
I
I'll walk
love that.
slowly through the thrift shop and yeah.
It makes sense though, because your work has a lot of nostalgia, or you have those found objects that you work with. So,
Well, and that's why I started working with them, because I was collecting them anyway. Our house has like all this weird stuff all over it, and I was keeping it really separate. It had nothing to do with my art. And I was like, that's what I've been telling people, especially with COVID. I've realized, like, when we were stuck at home and you had to kind of rely on whatever materials you had around because we
mhm,
couldn't go and buy stuff
mhm,
easily. Um, Kind of thinking about what you genuinely love. And if it's not in your artwork, why isn't it?
mm,
You know what I mean? Because
yeah.
it's like, why was I keeping all these weird tchotchkes and stuff like just on my mantle? It's like, ooh, if I smash it and rebuild it over here, it could be in my art. And then I loved my art even more because it was something I
Mhm,
genuinely loved, right? So um that's what I've been recommending to people, is like really just think about, you know, what you love that you think is separate. Like if
mhm,
you love your garden and you think that's separate from your art, is it?
right.
Like, could you press flowers and bring them into your work? Or could you take photographs of your garden and
Mhm,
incorporate that? Like,
mhm,
because for some reason we compartmentalize, and it makes your work so much more powerful. Like when you can bring in the pink thing, because my
yeah.
grandmother meant so much to me, and I can bring in these like knickknacks from the thrift shop because I
Mhm,
instantly love them. And then suddenly I love my work so much more. And now really don't care if other people like it or not. I
mhm,
used to be so concerned whether other people liked it or not. Now I don't care because I am so smitten with it, because it's all
mhm,
the things I love in one spot.
mm. Ooh, that's so good. I can relate to all that. It's like, say yes. Just say yes
Yeah.
to putting it all together. Put
Well,
it
and
in
I
a
think,
pot,
yeah,
see what
exactly. Like
happens.
we put so many rules on ourselves, especially if you've
Mhm,
gone to art school. You've got so many rules that you believe as truths. And it's like we kind of have to unlearn all of that
mhm,
and act like kids again. And just like, if you like pink, use pink. If you want to stick a
mhm,
flower on something, stick a flower on something. And don't worry about like, is it archival? Will galleries like this flower stuck to the thing? It's like, well, do you?
mhm. Yeah.
And let it go from there. And if it becomes a huge thing, okay, well then figure out a way to make it archival. But or don't. Like
Mhm.
Wayne White's work isn't archival and he could not care less,
Yeah. Oh, that's
you
so
know?
good. That's
Yeah.
so funny you said that, because I was just looking at a painting this morning thinking, well, it's on this canvas board. Is that archival? And then I looked at the packaging. Yep, it's archival. Okay, therefore I should finish this painting. Like, why? For what? For what? That's so funny you said that. It's
Yeah.
like, ah, I just needed that too. All
Yeah.
right, Danielle, so I wish I was really good at sports just in general. And it's funny because my husband's like super athletic, was in the Hall of Fame at his school. Anyway, if you want to be good at something, but you're not, because we're not good at everything, right? What's one thing you wish you were good at?
I have always wished that I was a surfer.
Really?
Yeah. I
Wow.
would love to just like, I love beaches. I love, we go to Hawaii every year and I can't even push myself up on the board. But you see all these like cool chicks who are just like out there just cruising around. And I'm like, I would like to do that.
Oh, that's
So there was a
cool.
show on like MTV or something years ago where teenagers would get paired with a mentor and they could like do whatever they wanted. And it
Oh
was like
yeah.
2 months of
Yes.
training and they could be
Yes.
whatever they wanted.
I saw that.
Yeah, it was so good. Like somebody wanted, like they'd never been on a skateboard before, but they wanted to be in a skateboard competition. I was like, I would said to my husband, I would do surfing. So there you go.
Okay. It's never
Yeah.
too late.
What would you do?
Well, I would play volleyball probably because I'm terrible at pretty much any sports. I'm a runner too. I'm nursing an injury from a year ago, so I'm
Oh,
walking. I know. So that's hard. That's hard when
it
you are a
is.
runner and then you can't. But anyway, I'm a walker now and it's good. It's all good. All right. I feel like you've offered a lot of creative challenges and prompts. Is there one last thing that you want to? I mean, maybe you've said a lot, so I don't even know if we need any more, but is there one little thing you want to say?
I'll give you one of my favorite prompts.
Okay.
And this is good for people with kids too, but I also highly recommend you just do it by yourself. The dice one, where you you get 2 dice, you roll it, and if you get like a 1-1, that means 11. If you get a 3-2, that's 32. If you get a 6-6, that's going to take you a really long time, so maybe roll again. But it's amount of time. So say I roll a 1-2, that's 12 minutes. You then travel for 12 minutes on you can walk, you can ride a bike, you can go on a bus, you can drive for that amount of time. When your timer goes off at 12 minutes, you stop wherever you are, as long as it's safe and not scary. And you spend 1 hour in that spot
Ooh.
taking in everything that you can. So you can record sounds, you can photograph things, you can sketch, you can write down overheard conversation, anything for 1 hour. Then you go back to your studio immediately and you make something based on whatever things you found out there. And it's so cool because it makes you very present,
Mm-hmm.
and especially if it's like 12 minutes, you've probably passed this place a bazillion times and never
Yes.
noticed any of the things. And it's just it's a great way to shake yourself out of a rut. If you're in the studio and like this painting is not working, roll your dice, go for a walk, sit somewhere else for an hour and just, and it'll probably help you with whatever you're working on, or
Mm-hmm.
it'll, help start a new idea. I did it one time on my birthday and I'd gotten a new cruiser bike. And so I think I got like 22 minutes or something. So I went for a 22-minute bike ride. And when my little timer went off, I stopped at this intersection I'd never been at. And the street names were White and Braid. So I ended up going back to my studio and braiding white embroidery thread into these like little white braids. And then I incorporated them into a piece. And it was so beautiful. And never in my life would I have made a white braid had I not stopped at White and Braid.
Whoa. I
Right?
love that.
Yeah. So it's a really fun, easy thing to do. And like I said, like with kids and stuff, if you've got squirrely kids on a Saturday who need to get out of the house, it's like roll the dice and be like, okay, guys, let's go do this like
Oh,
fun
my girls
thing,
would love that. That's
Yeah.
fun.
And it's great for you too, because you can be looking at different stuff than them. So you can still have this creative moment for yourself, even if you've got your kids along with you for the ride. And, then you all come home and you make something based on what you found. Or I do this every year when I go to Venice. I get the class to do that. So we get to wander around Venice.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, and it's just a really neat way to take in a city in a different way. So I sometimes do it when I'm traveling, and I'm in a city I don't know.
Mm.
That's why I say you got to make sure you're in a safe. You don't end up in a sketchy neighborhood. But yeah, it's a fun one to do.
Awesome. Excuse me. I was trying not to cough like that whole time, but I was paying attention
Oh,
and I love that prompt. I've never heard of that before. Did you make
it's
that
a
up?
good one. No, that was in Creative Block. It was when I asked each of them to give me an blocking exercise. That was from a ceramicist in Australia named Mel Robson.
Okay.
And I just thought it was such a good one. And so I use it all the time.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm definitely going to do
Yeah.
that. My birthday's coming up. Maybe I'll have to do it then.
Yeah. And that's a nice thing too. It's kind of like in the artist way, the artist dates that you have to give yourself. It's
Yes.
also a really nice treat to just go by yourself and
Yeah.
hopefully you roll the dice and stop near a coffee shop because, if you can turn it into a little afternoon for yourself, it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so important to get out of the studio. I've definitely done more of that. And magic happens when I leave my studio. I run into somebody or I see a poster, a flyer, different
It's,
opportunities arise. So
it's
I love
absolutely
that
true.
so
You
much.
got to go out and get the inspiration from somewhere and then bring it back.
Hmm. Okay. I just have a little tickle in my throat. So I think this is a perfect time to close. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Danielle. This has been fantastic. Definitely thank you for your generosity in your time and in sharing with us. And I cannot wait to see what happens next with you and your art career and your book releases and whatever else you create. You are such an inspiration and a gift to this world. And thank you so much for putting in the work. Thank you for investing in artists. Thank you for being jealous and teaching us so many lessons. I think your life is it's such a testament to following your intuition, not letting a bad experience ruin everything, learning from it and growing. And I don't know. I know that you've helped a lot of creative people over the past many years, and it's so exciting to see you grow and follow your art now, and to see what you're up to. So, thank you again so much. Oh my
Thank
gosh,
you. And thank you for like the thoughts about the podcast because I've never really thought about talking about myself on there. And
really?
maybe there's something, yeah. So maybe there's something there, like maybe it's like art for your ear, something, and those will be like mini episodes where I can talk about my work or
Or just
yeah, I got to think about that because there's something there. And I really appreciate you saying that because maybe there's a way for me to be able to do this again in a new way.
I think that when you have the spotlight on others, for you've been doing that forever. Um, not forever. Geez, drama much, but you that's been a focus for you. And as much as I love those episodes that you created, like I said, when PETA talked to you about your art, after getting to know you through the years and talking about other artists, I'm so curious, and just seeing you. And I don't know if it would be if I don't think you'd have to do a rebrand and call it something different because you are the Jealous Curator, but it could be
Mhm.
from the studio of the Jealous Curator. And you could
Mm.
start every show and say, I've been following artists for so long and I'm so inspired and I'm creating this work. And I'm here to share with you what my work, what I'm doing. And you can even talk about other artists as far as, I'm really inspired by so and so and how they create this style of ceramic. I really can see that in my work. And I think that you have this whole library of knowledge of art history and other artists, and talking about how that plays into your work, or even just not talking about your work from a super like conceptual, like you don't have to, not every, just talking about it from a process level is really
Yeah.
interesting. Talking about
Mhm.
it from how you explore, all of those behind the scene things are really fascinating. So yeah, and if you don't want to do it on your
Awesome.
own,
I
just
feel like
have.
I need to go refill my coffee and get my pretty notebook out and write a whole bunch of that down because you've got me all
Ooh,
inspired.
okay,
Yeah.
yay. I could It's so fun when artists get together, isn't it? So
It's amazing, especially when because it can feel really lonely and it's really nice
mhm,
that all of these podcasts exist and there's communities developing
mhm,
and especially amongst women and like art
mhm.
queens and all of it. It's just
Yes.
it's so fabulous. I
I
love it.
know. We all do better when we help each other out and check in with each other.
Absolutely.
And I think, there's a lot of ways you can try it. You can just go solo on the mic if you want to talk into the mic. But if that's uncomfortable for you, or you think if it's not as exciting, you can just invite an artist friend and have a coffee chat date. And, hey, what are you up to this week? What do you and Ashley, that'd be a
Yeah.
riot to hear,
Yeah.
what she's doing, what you're doing, or, you have all these artist friends. It's not like you're you're
Yeah.
hurting for people to talk
I know I
to.
have
So
amazing people that would be on there in a heartbeat.
yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be anything formal. It could be very casual. And, I
Yeah,
think we're
I
all looking.
really like that. It sort of and then it takes the pressure off of um all the pressure I've put on it. That kind
Yeah.
of takes it all away, which I like.
Yeah.
Yay, thank you.
Keep
I
it
did not
simple.
expect to get that out of this.
Well,
Perfect.
who knows? You never know
Yeah,
what you're going to get. So,
I know. I
oh,
love
I
it.
love it. Well, Danielle, I love talking to you so much. I would love to have you back on the show someday, or, we'll connect on
Absolutely.
Instagram, and I'm going to have all of your links in my show notes. I hope everybody really spends some time to get to know you more. Check out your subscription, your newsletter. Highly recommend that. Your books are all on Amazon and at bookstores, and um, hopefully, definitely we can get to know you more and support you as you keep going. So thanks
Thank
again
you
so
so
much.
much.
I hope you have a
Thanks.
wonderful day. And thanks everyone for tuning into this week's episode of I Like Art. I appreciate you all so much. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.